It's the DIY Guide to Evolutionary Bottlenecks, Composting of Brains, and Self-Exploding Cosmic Jokes, Part 2. Kamarampi, to die, to be reborn. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in time of great moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. Dante Alighieri. To know each other, we must reach beyond the sphere of our sense perceptions. Nikola Tesla. Welcome back to the rant. Thank you for returning. To quickly recap, our ship has sailed from the Peruvian coast, a hellhole of Lima, which has been dealt one of the toughest quarantine measures, without the safety net of social security and government aid, which saw a vast majority drown in strife and experience a kind of hardship which would see the citizens of the developed world up in arms, rebelling for their liberties and survival. One can ignore the news and walk away in the opposite direction, as it's easy to be culturally distanced. It's easy for a gringo to feel superior towards poorly educated, technologically challenged, and generally rough around the edges descendants of a previously enslaved and rubbed into the dirt nation. I remember standing in Lima for the first time, just over a dozen years ago, and thinking, this is like watching Soviet films from the 1930s. The same unhinged gestures, the same emotive openness, the same naivety. It made me feel right at home. There was no overexposed sexuality, no damsels strutting down the block one could smell by excessive use of deodorant even before they turned a corner, and virtually no animosity or fighting taking place. The Peruvians work too hard to have any energy left for such nonsense. All of this is changing rapidly, of course, but not the use of traditional medicines and sacred plants for healing and consciousness-expanding purposes in rituals and ceremonies. Coca, wachuma, tobacco have come forth into focus of public awareness for a specific reason: to help us understand the precious gift of plant partnership that was lost at the dawn of time. It is now a question of survival for people to be introduced to the facts concerning their true identity. Allow me to hand it over to Terence McKenna for a specific instruction in the use of teacher plants. This essential identity is explicitly addressed by a plant hallucinogen. Not to know one's true identity is to be a mad, disensouled thing, a golem, and indeed this image, sickeningly Orwellian, applies to the mass of human beings now living in the high-tech industrial democracies. Their authenticity lies in their ability to obey and follow mass style changes that are conveyed through the media. Immersed in junk food, trash media, and crypto-fascist politics, they are condemned to toxic lives of low awareness. Sedated by the prescripted daily television fix, they are the living dead, lost to all but the act of consuming. Oh yes, the zombified reality of it all. I can't watch TV longer than 5 minutes without praying for a nuclear holocaust. That's from Bill Hicks, turning it up a notch. Here's his take on governing chemistries. If you want to understand a society, take a good look at the drugs it uses. And what can this tell you about American culture? Well, look at the drugs we use. Except for pharmaceutical poison, there are essentially only two drugs that Western civilization tolerates. Caffeine from Monday to Friday to energize you enough to make you a productive member of society, and alcohol from Friday to Monday to keep you too stupid to figure out the prison that you're living in. Talking about drugs, a drug is something that causes unexamined, obsessive, and habitual behavior. One doesn't examine obsessive behavior, one is too busy doing it. One lets nothing get in the way of gratification. This is the kind of life that we're being sold at every level in the West: to watch, to consume, to remain passive victim, a zombie. We've heard nothing of reciprocity, nothing of giving thanks. Ask a school kid, is the planet alive? Is it conscious? Does it have a soul? I bet you $10 they will look befuddled to begin with, being unwilling to shine a light on confusion and a lack of information pertaining to this simple question. and laugh behind your back when you leave, because that's what we do to conceal our ignorance. We destroy the one who knows better. Apart from yoga classes that barely foot the bill for spiritual yearning, one stumbles upon McKenna's rhetoric off in a tiny corner, reserved for social outlaws and alternative desperados searching for original meaning in their pilgrimage to the source. If the expansion of consciousness does not loom large in the human future, what kind of future is it going to be? To my mind, the pro-psychedelic position is most fundamentally threatening to the establishment because, when fully and logically thought through, it is an anti-drug, anti-addiction position. And make no mistake about it, the issue is drugs. How drugged shall you be? Or to put it another way, how conscious shall you be? Who shall be conscious? Who shall be unconscious? Whether or not the psychedelic option represents the only counterflow directed against a tendency to leave people in designer states of consciousness, it is definitely not their own designs, but the designs of Madison Avenue, of the Pentagon, of the Fortune 500 corporations. This isn't just a metaphor employed by McKenna. It's a global program broadcast day and night while the lights are on and the radios keep blaring. And it's our own hands selecting channels on remote controls and turning dials to get the latest updates on virus-related deaths, traffic accidents, and the weather. One story you never hear in the news goes like this. Bill Hicks reporting. Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we were all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death, life is only a dream, and we are the imaginations of ourselves. McKenna took an aerial view on the scenery back in the 90s. He was probably quite high at the time. Looking down on Los Angeles from an airliner, I never failed to notice that it's like looking at a printed electric circuit, all those curved driveways and cul-de-sacs with the same little modules installed along each one. As long as the Reader's Digest stays subscribed to and the TV stays on, these modules are all interchangeable parts within a very large machine. This is the nightmarish reality that Marshall McLuhan and Wyndham Lewis and others foresaw, the creation of the public as herd. The public has no history and no future. The public lives in a golden moment created by a credit system which binds them ineluctably to a web of illusions that is never quite critiqued. This is the ultimate consequence of having broken off the symbiotic relationship with the Gaian matrix of the planet. This is the consequence of a lack of partnership. This is the legacy of imbalance between the sexes. This is the terminal phase of a long descent into meaninglessness and toxic existential confusion. End of quote. The ripples, however, continue in this adage of Graham Hancock. I believe we are a species with amnesia. I think we have forgotten our roots and our origins. I think we are quite lost in many ways. And we live in a society that invests huge amounts of money and vast quantities of energy in ensuring that we all stay lost. A society that invests in creating unconsciousness, which invests in keeping people asleep so that we are just passive consumers or products and not really asking any of the questions. Maybe not. But we sure flock to the big screens to the Wachowski brothers, now sisters, apocalyptic treatment of this exact dilemma. And we come away stunned by the accuracy of on-screen implementation. At least I did, because indeed, the Matrix is a prison for your mind, and it is indeed everywhere. It's all around us, even now in this very room. You can see it when you look at your window, when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you're a slave, bro, like everyone else. You were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind. Only after you take the red pill and get unplugged can you see that we're living in a world saturated by simulacra, controlled by mega powers beyond our ken. Only then Can you see that we think we have choices, but we don't? We think we're free, but we aren't. Bill Hicks had a way of breathing into the microphone that overloaded the PA every time with his subliminal frequencies. Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control. Here's American Gladiators. 56 channels of it. Watch these pituitary retards bang their fucking skulls together and congratulate you on living in the land of freedom. Here you go, America. You're free to do what we tell you. Go to bed, wake up, go to work. Our bodies are batteries that provide the energy for the running of nameless, faceless corporations. Most of us in the Western world are corporate slaves. Even if we're not entirely happy, we are for the most part unwilling to make meaningful changes in our lives. Most of us would never forsake our hyper-real world for the desert of the real. It takes acute degrees of suffering and being utterly uncomfortable with the state of affairs before man will contemplate throwing off his shackles and rebelling. If someone like Morpheus was to come along to liberate us, we would see him as an arrogant, self-righteous and fanatical terrorist, because the Matrix itself is designed, like Huxley's Brave New World, to oppress you not through totalitarian force, but through totalitarian pleasure dangled on the end of a stick in front of your nose at all times, just out of reach. Osho, previously known as Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, most commonly referred to in his home country as the sex guru, was perhaps one of the most fitting descriptions of a liberal terrorist in the broadest possible sense, which saw him treated as such by the overwhelming majority of democracies around the world. What came out of his mouth was sheer, undiluted anarchy. The following passage is taken from his discourse entitled Book of Wisdom, some years prior to his mysterious death in 1990. We are the last generation which has the possibility to rebel, and if we don't rebel, there may be no more chances. So rebel while there is still time. I don't think there is much time left, maybe just this last part of the century, these coming 20 or 25 years. If humanity can rebel in these next 25 years, this is the last opportunity. Otherwise, people will be utterly unable to. Their unconscious will dominate them. Up to now, the society has only been able to pollute your conscious mind through education, through the church, through propaganda, but only your conscious mind. Your unconscious is still free. It happens more often that you are closer to the truth, closer to reality when you are deeply asleep. It's very strange. It should not be so. You should be closer to reality while you're awake, but your wakefulness is no longer yours. It is Hindu, it is Christian, it is Mohammedan. It is no longer yours. Society has already impinged upon it, interfered with it, distorted it. But the unconscious is still yours. To put this in context, Osho was referring to the then ongoing brain warfare, a Soviet research into hypnopedia techniques related to targeted memory reactivation, or TMR. Sounds that can later be played or cued during electroencephalography, EEG, verified sleep, to strengthen memory. Or basically the ability to implant the content of your dreams, which would mean abolishing privacy altogether. Even sleep ends up being a personal experience when owned by the state. Fast forward to the recent months, Microsoft has just been granted an international patent for a cryptocurrency system using body activity data that leverages human activities, including brainwaves and body heat, when performing online tasks such as search engines, chatbots, and reading ads. A user can solve the computationally difficult problem unconsciously, the patent reads. In order to access this validation data, the human user would need to have a sensor attached to or installed in their body. Coincidentally or otherwise, the last 6 digits of the patent's 11-digit number contain 3 sixes separated by zeros, invoking the biblical passage that prophesied a digital ID implantation method used among corporate workers today. And the second beast, says Revelations, required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. Revelation 13:16. Microsoft envisages users being rewarded for allowing their bodies to be monitored in this way by paying them in cryptocurrency for performing specific tasks. Magnetic resonance imaging and EEG sensors are used for this purpose, as well as near-infrared spectroscopy, that's NIRS sensors, heart rate monitors, thermal sensors, optical sensors, the whole shebang. Here's a quote from the Institute of Human Obsolescence, founded by Manuel Beltran. A single human body at rest radiates 100 watts of excess heat. We created a bodysuit that uses thermoelectric generators to harvest the temperature differential between the human body and ambient temperature and converts this into usable electricity. The electricity generated is then fed to a computer that produces cryptocurrency. Workers have to lay down and do nothing. Right. To get chipped for the sake of connectivity and getting recompensed for the unconscious brain activity is essentially ushering Big Brother into your bedroom. It readily invokes images of Lawrence Fishburne in his full Morpheus getup, long leather trench coat and shades, holding up a battery. What is the Matrix? Pause to reflect. Control. A matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to turn a human being into a charge-holding capacitor. After all, we are getting obsolete very fast, incrementally fast, as artificial intelligence dawns to exterminate mechanical tasks performed by a man. Just you wait. Sci-fi will walk into your kitchen and do the dishes, chop the veggies, walk the dog, build a house, put your kids to bed, if you are plugged in and chosen for your valuable contribution to cryptocurrency banking, that is. According to Bill Gates, 6 out of 7 people currently populating the planet are a detrimental factor in the energy consumption equation. At this point, a quote from a renowned pacifist with a penchant for dystopian novels is in order, as it strikes a chord with surprise outbreak promises and missiles over microbes. Preferences to curb population growth. Death control is extremely easy under modern circumstances. Birth control is extremely difficult. The reason is very simple. Death control, the control, for example, of infectious diseases, can be accomplished by a handful of experts and quite a small labor force of unskilled persons, and requires a very small capital expenditure. Aldous Huxley, 1959. Which explains why global philanthropists at his Good Club are meeting behind closed doors to discuss if the richest people on Earth can actually save the planet. This is from The Guardian. The established media source surmises that the members of a billionaires club control vast wealth, and with that wealth comes huge power that could reshape nations according to their will. Few doubt the good intentions of Gates and Winfrey and their kind. They've already improved the lives of millions of poor people across the developing world. Just one of its projects, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, is estimated by the World Health Organization to have prevented 3.4 million deaths in just 8 years. Gates is young enough and active enough to take a full hands-on role in his philanthropy and craft it after his own ideas. The cynic in me is having a ball all by himself while intelligence is quarantined somewhere else. Divide and conquer. Blanket bomb the world with mass hysteria and fear concurrently peddling a panacea of a magic jab which will save one from future discomforts and possible death. As a bonus, if one gets a digital ID injected into their bloodstream, there'll be no place to get lost on this planet anymore. Not in the mountains, not in the jungle. Truly, the days of mining for minerals are over. Mining data is where it's at. It's not a coincidence that 5G was introduced at exactly the same time the pandemic occurred. Gates may consider himself a savior. Many may hail him as a hope of nations, but none of it will change the fact that virtual superconnectivity and integration with technology are not helping man to be humane, and only exacerbate already existing state of disconnectedness from nature. This in itself is the only evil in existence, which makes biblical passages about the mark of the beast sound poignantly prophetic, even to a complete non-believer such as myself. Believing anything is stupid, the same as rejecting something because one had not the pleasure of experiencing it. Facts of history are there to draw parallels from. The man who has no sense of history is like the man who has no ears or eyes. Adolf Hitler, to whom belongs this quote, was just as affable in the public eye in 1930s as Bill Gates is at the present, and was a much more charismatic figure at that. Tactics employed by a failed painter were virtually identical. An intentionally set fire in the German Reichstag building in 1933 enabled the Nazis to set up emergency laws, a crackdown on terrorism, and justify the police state. Hitler knew the ropes. If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. Such a spreading menace of a highly contagious virus that will rampage through the world until a quick fix of a phenomenal vaccine is mandated to each and every individual across the globe. To quote Gates, it's absolutely a major part of our ability to go back out, leave our homes, go back to work, and go to big sports events. Bread and games politics hasn't changed much since the Roman Empire ran things in the 1st century AD, has it? Go back to what work? The work that makes possible our insatiable lifestyle, currently causing mass extinction of species? In any case, if you're wondering how does one go about telling a big enough lie, our global philanthropist funds Our World in Data, a website that is tracking the latest statistics and research on the coronavirus pandemic. He funds BBC coverage of global health and development issues, both through the BBC Action Media Organisation and the BBC itself. He also funds World Health coverage on ABC News. The examples go on and on. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's fingerprints can be seen on every major global health initiative of the past 2 decades. As for the coming attractions, we believe unbelievable progress can be made over this decade in both inventing new vaccines and making sure they get out to all the children who need them, Gates promulgates, while stringing mutually negating concepts in one sentence without wincing. Hitler's rhetoric echoes in the same vein. The state must declare the child to be the most precious treasure of the people. As long as the government is perceived as working for the benefit of the children, the people will happily endure almost any curtailment of liberty and almost any deprivation. The great dictator has made quite a dent for a reason, and his methods, as well as his occult research, have been taken abroad across the ocean, just as megalomaniac predicted. My spirit will rise from the grave, and the world will see I was right. This is an actual quote from Adolf Hitler, not a line from Rasputin's character slayed by Hellboy, believe it or not. It's not a coincidence that population control and reproductive health issues that instigated worldwide vaccination programs of Gates, in which he ardently advocates every chance he gets, have been used for half a century as a euphemism for eugenics, the discredited pseudoscience that holds that certain families are fit to be leaders of society by virtue of their superior genes. Yes, the same eugenics that fueled Nazi propaganda of a pure-blooded elite ruling the world. Another rung on the ladder of understanding of how it works is the fact that Ernst Rudin, who would go on to draft Nazi Germany's forced sterilization law, was sponsored by none other than the Rockefellers as part of the research into eugenics conducted by Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Germany. Later down the track, in his book Showing Up for Life, Bill Gates writes admiringly of the Rockefellers and their influence in the field. Every corner we've turned in the field of global health, we've found that the Rockefellers were already there and had been there for years. When we committed to childhood immunization, we found ourselves building on the efforts of the Rockefeller Foundation that they had helped launch and fund in the 1980s. Hitler would indeed smile in his grave upon hearing it. What he couldn't do with bullets and artillery shells is being accomplished with needles by a light hand of the great global philanthropist, Bill Gates. It's probably unethical to compare these men, regardless of my affection for personal freedom. For one of them has neither a resounding oomph to his delivery, a baseball accident downstairs in his teens, nor a stage presence to speak of. Perhaps I shouldn't have started researching mechanisms involved in population control, as it is a highly controversial and rotten business that suspends one's disbelief through sheer volume of accumulated material readily available on the internet. There's real heavy-duty stuff one click away, referencing virtually any aspect of man's activities and madness perpetuated since the beginning of the written history of mankind. No turning back on it now. The only way is through understanding and transcending it all. While digging up the Nazi rise to power, I came across a speech by Martin Bormann, Nazi Party official, talking about ruling Slavic peoples after their successful subjugation. He concluded that education is dangerous. It is enough if they can count up to 100. At best, an education which produces useful coolies for us is admissible. Every educated person is a future enemy. This is truly a problem with the third world. People in technologically challenged countries are not equipped with sufficient capacities of abstract cognition for the lack of exposure to scientific and academic argument, for better or worse. On one hand, there's no risk in suffering cognitive dissonance. On the other, there's no resistance to prevalent memes in the media broadcast stream. They've got no defense or immunity against mimetic virology, which makes me wonder if this very article will be understood in Peru. Probably not. The semantics will be lost in translation, the same way as Bill Murray got lost in his whiskey promotion tour of Japan. There's a world of difference between cultural ambience. A gringo could just as well be an extraterrestrial alien from outer space. How could understanding be possible? As luck would have it, I am more of a pilgrim rather than a tourist, with a penchant for Henry Miller's honest-to-God self-reflection. I am of the very essence of that proud, boastful Nordic people who have never had the least sense of adventure, but who nevertheless have scoured the earth, turned it upside down, scattering relics and ruins everywhere. Restless spirits, but not adventurous ones, agonizing spirits, incapable of living in the present, disgraceful cowards, all of them, myself included. For there is only one great adventure, and that is inward towards the self. And for that, time, nor space, nor even deeds matter. And that, my friends, the holy grail of true knowledge, is the only knowledge possible, is the knowledge of the self. Attaining truth is not a question of believing one side of an argument or the other, but a questioning of meditativeness that reconnects one with the rest of existence. McKenna, in his blunt yet hypnotic American drawl, considers belief to be a form of infantilism. There's no ground for believing anything, he says. Joe Bloggs, on the other hand, will believe just about anything these days. The only victim, if he manages to silence the news, is his own ability to evolve. This psychology, without a doubt, is a result of snowballing knowledge coming on down from a higher authority that one accumulates in the process of growing up, be it impressed by a parent, a friend, a teacher, or a doctor, and thus, feeling fairly significant, our Joe shuts the door in the face of genuine opportunities to be perplexed and to question the narrative, any narrative. One needs courage to surrender an opinionated argument. This is a little death on its own, a death of self-identification. In his Book of Wisdom discourse, Osho describes man as basically a coward. Man doesn't want to inquire, and he doesn't want to say, "I don't know," either. One does not believe in the sun or the moon. One doesn't believe in the theory of relativity. Either you understand it or you don't. There's no question of belief. Any science is no different, including those pathogens and germs that either plague your world or are a symbiotic part of it, depending on your understanding. Accepting one's ignorance needs courage. and the beginning of real knowledge. One goes on believing for the lack of understanding. There are 300 religions on earth, one truth and 300 religions? One God and 300 religions? Jesus says truth liberates, but how to attain to truth? It's not a question of believing, but a question of emptying your mind completely of all belief, ideology, concept, and thought. Only in an empty mind, when there is no dust left on the mirror, truth reflects. That reflection is a benediction. To discover truth is arduous. It needs a long pilgrimage. It needs a great emptying of the mind. It needs a great cleansing of the heart. It needs a certain innocence, a rebirth. You have to become a child again. It's Osho from the Book of Wisdom. Only very few people have ever dared discover truth. It's risky. It may shatter all that you have known before, and you will have to rearrange your whole life. It's dangerous. It may destroy your illusions. It may shatter all your dreams. Indeed, life has no obligations to fulfill. It does not issue receipts of guarantee. I have a friend who had 2 major surprise shocks in her life: finding out Santa Claus didn't exist and realizing her father was not her father. I mean, forget Forrest Gump with a box of chocolates on his lap. Speaking of surprises, she packed up her things and was gone for a while from the family radar. If her father was not her father, what else did they tell her that was a lie? I just laughed when I heard her admissions, very inappropriately. We're all surrounded in our bubbles of big and small deceptions about the world that is continuously exploding on a subatomic level with song, dance, and melody that would overwhelm our sensory input if we only allowed a tiny draft of it, but to push ajar our doors of perception. Right there is a true meeting place. To know each other, we must reach beyond the sphere of our sense perceptions. That was from Nikola Tesla. He also said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Science and mysticism come hand in hand to deal healing intelligence, if one is tuned in to receive it. Once you're resonating with the deific pitchfork, references come gushing in superabundance. Albert Einstein said, "We are slowed down sound and light waves, a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music." Terence McKenna says there is an angel within the monkey struggling to get free, and this is what the historical crisis is all about. Indeed, one could only hope this concurrent chrysalis is resolved to the benefit of the angel and not the other way around. There's hope. Hope dies last. In our own time, through integrative sciences like ecology and animal behavior and psychology, we have re-understood what was forgotten during the reduction centuries of modern science. We've re-understood that the world is one thing and it's a living thing. It's a thing with an intent and a spirit within it, and this is the key concept. Hallelujah, at last! This key concept has been very nicely embedded in the prevailing animism of Amazonian tribal peoples, which is now thoroughly diluted by Catholic dogma due to the efforts of missionaries more than willing to donate mosquitoes and leeches their blood supply, but which survives nonetheless. And to the enduring notion of Pachamama and the Andean culture. Pachamama is considered to be a great cosmic being who is the planet Earth. To the Q'ero people, Earth is not only alive, but it is also a conscious node of filaments in the cosmic web with their own qualities. Apus manifested in the mountains, are highly revealed by Andean people who organize much of their lives around them by honoring and making requests from them, serving them, gaining visions and powers from them, for these are also conscious nodes in the web. Plots of cultivated fields, the chakras, are likewise the daughters of the Pachamama. Rivers and lakes have their own personalities and powers, which can be experienced and worked with. Not from the Yache center, where intellect resides, but from the Mune, where the heart energy dwells. The love of the Mune is not an emotion, It is not romantic love, or sentimental, or capable of jealousy. The love of the Mune is the experience of being interconnected to the rest of the cosmos. I've met venerable Pacuos consulted for healing and divination who'd refused to speak Spanish and just looked through you as if you were made of glass and rendered transparent. They still remember when for a white man to shoot a native savage was not much different than putting down a rabid dog. One can't help but lament what could have been learnt from these Incas that fled to the high mountains and deep jungles from Spanish marauders to preserve their cultural identity. In the last 500 years, we could be living with a different vision now. The cosmos is sacred. The Pachamama is sacred. We are sacred. The trees are sacred. Oakley Gordon, who studied the Q'ero people, divulges that we don't have a unique relationship with the cosmos, other than that each species is unique. We are not special compared to everything else because we were made in God's image. We are instead all aspects of an undifferentiated cosmos that is sacred, and by not being special, we are not separate from nature. We are part of nature. Pacha refers to space-time, as a matter of fact. A particular place at a particular time. Our time as the children of the sun is limited, according to the Q'ero. They say that at the end of the last century, we passed through the Pachacuti, the time of the Great Transformation, and we are now in a crucial interim period where we need to get it together as a species or face dire environmental consequences. The Pacha of the children of the sun is ending and will be gone when snow leaves Mount Asungate. The amount of melting is quite unbelievable there. Glacial ice caves are simply not becoming smaller, but disappearing altogether. I know this to be true, as these are the very temples I worship on my biannual excursions to Cuzco. The next Pacha will be the time of the sacred children who have moved beyond their current limitations into a new way of being. A way of being we need to create now. But how does one go about it? Good question. Descending from high-browed gene pool responsible for spawning the likes of Descartes and prone to unsightly episodes caused by exploding head syndrome while attributing our very existence to thinking alone, we move with eyes shut and ears stopped. We smash walls where doors are waiting to open to the touch. We grope for ladders, forgetting that we have wings. We pray as if God were deaf and blind, as if he were in space. No wonder the angels in our midst are unrecognizable. This extract from Henry Miller illustrates the futility of doing anything as we are. Internally violent, confused, fueled by unbalanced chemistry, we destroy everything we touch or focus our attention on by proxy. A man responsible for the current state of affairs is impotent indeed of fixing anything, at least in my humble opinion. A kind of reset is what we need first and foremost. Internal. In the words of Osho, to be unenlightened is something that one has earned. Great effort has been invested in being unenlightened. Continuously, you have to go on making an effort to remain unenlightened. Ain't that the truth? Our lives are built on achieving, clambering up the stairs, earning the living, being busy. A worldwide pandemic is nothing compared to the amount of damage done out of the very best intentions by our own parents, teachers, and gurus. It's a vicious cycle, really. The one and only change possible is, and always will be, an inner quantum jump. It is a question of energy and vibration. Just drop making any more efforts to remain unenlightened. And you are enlightened. Enlightenment is your natural state. It is what you are. Thank God for that. Otherwise, I'd be endlessly reincarnated as a tormented scribbler come get-lost specialist. If we survive this ordeal at all, and rebirth is still an option. In any case, it's easy to get lost in the unrelenting bombardment of information coming at warp speed from all possible angles since the start of the lockdown. As a friend said, in an epidemic of mass panic, logic was one of the first victims. Like a brick coming down with a toppling monolith, it simply indicates unwholesomeness of the structure deemed invested with stability and endurance. It would be too simple to shift the blame onto an evil clique running global conspiracies of totalitarian control, lizards from outer space orchestrating a puppetry show, and in doing so there's no need to deal with the mess in one's relationships and the dirt swept under the carpet. It can stay there. Charles Eisenstein nails it in his latest essay, The Conspiracy Myth. Just as in bioterrain theory, germs are symptoms and exploiters of diseased tissue, so also are conspiratorial cabals, symptoms and exploiters of a diseased society, a society poisoned by the mentality of war, fear, separation, and control. This deep ideology, the myth of separation, is beyond anyone's power to invent. The Illuminati, if they exist, are not its authors. It is more true to say that the mythology is their author. We do not create our myths. They create us. Here I have to point out, however, that myths and mimetic virology create our thinking, but they do not create us. That's not a possibility. If one has not accessed first-hand experience of one's nature, if one has never been in rapture, then how can one know the difference? Hence, misperception follows. Charles Eisenstein is right in saying that the myth of separation is beyond anyone's power to invent. It is an outcome of a duality state, and fear arises within it quite logically indeed. Sadhguru, that bearded yogi, shaking quietly while he laughs at everything, points out that morality is another rotten apple fallen from this diseased apple tree. If your index finger or a thumb is an extension of yourself, why create legislation to govern its liberties? Drop the duality. There will be no fear, no judgment, no subjugation. Control is a direct outcome of claustrophobic fear surrounding the illusion of separation. The bigger the illusion, the tighter the control. And as with blowing up an air balloon, as every child knows, it will get tougher still until the point of release occurs. Either by the slip of a finger hold, followed by a long deflating whistle, or a violent outburst accompanied by shreds of rubber flying in unpredictable directions. One way or another, the human psyche cannot withstand unlimited pressure. This is why digital ID, improved 5G connectivity, compulsory vaccinations, screening of private conversations on social media, and monitoring of every transaction for the sake of consumer safety and service improvement are met with a stoic, albeit disgruntled opposition by those who are privy to experience a oneness at some point in their lives. It cannot be expected to be otherwise. The dialogue between those who know the pleasure and those who don't is not possible either. This article cannot serve as a bridge to walk across to a different understanding. It may give a tickle and inspire a heartfelt remark here and there in those who know, and either instigate further growth or lead into a more muddled state of affairs than before, embarking on the journey through this rugged semantic landscape and those who don't know any better. Before expounding further into a bumpy territory filled with quotes and citations, I'd like to inject Henry Miller's advice regarding the written word in general. I believe that today, more than ever, a book should be sought after even if it has only one great page in it. We must search for fragments, splinters, toenails, anything that has ore in it, anything that is capable of resuscitating the body and the soul. Miller had no idea what air-conditioned nightmare he envisaged back in 1939 would spawn in this day of ours. A presence of soul, companion of the truth, has shrunk from pornography of consumerism into far corners of this collective psyche. The flotsam on the surface, as we all know, cannot be trusted. The overflowing abundance online is a breeding ground for unhealthy memes. Such an outpour, however, can be either friend or a foe, depending on the attitude one brings into inquiry. Ultimately, truth is not a virus. does not infect indiscriminately. You have to fight to get, in fact, staking everything, your life included. Presumably, I was under a great deal of weather when this particular revelation was bestowed upon me, immersed in a trance and quite out of my body. Confusion, both physical and emotional, happens to be a precursor before reaching any kind of clarity. Here's from the Guru's discourse. To feel confusion needs great intelligence. Confusion is a great opportunity. It simply says that through the mind there is no way. If you are really confused, you are blessed. Now something is possible, something immensely valuable. You are on the verge. If you are utterly confused, that means the mind has failed. Now the mind can no longer supply any certainty to you. When there is no mind, there can be no future. There can be no program for the future. Then this moment is all. This moment is your whole existence. The whole existence starts converging on this moment, and the moment becomes tremendously significant. It has depth, it has height, it has mystery, it has intensity, it has fire, it has immediacy, it grips you, it possesses you, it transforms you. Indeed, confusion and cognitive dissonance is an opportunity for growth. As the plans crumbled and lockdown was imposed, it felt strangely refreshing amid closing shut borders and grave voices of news reporters heralding the impending doom worldwide. Just as the darkest hour precipitates dawn, COVID-19 has caused the aforementioned convergence of the life force, and all Jedi in training surely felt it. In the wake of losing external freedoms, attention was directed internally. For some, flowing naturally around the bend, for others, grudgingly forced to do an about-turn. What can one do about being quarantined at the end of the day? Cause a revolt? Get manhandled onto the streets and thrown into cells? Or just shot on the spot for violent opposition to forced martial law? A policeman has a bigger stick and all the training to go with the most efficient way of using it. I've been chased once by 2 patrol cars for failing to wear a helmet until they caught up with me jumping a high fence, holding me by the feet while the serrated edges of the wire dug into my guts. I still have those scars and can still feel the knee on the back of my neck pressing me to the ground. Wear your safety helmet, boy, or we will show you what it's like to be struck by oncoming traffic by our awesome power of imagination alone. It was a great lesson to have an escape route planned for future deviations from public safety. I never strapped my helmet afterwards, just wearing it as a loose formality. Same as having a mask that does not do anything about fixing your immune system, but simply stops you from breathing freely. Having come from the Soviet Union, and having been born in a town known for its 3 revolutions, I know too well that none of this bogus safety works. Bright ideals end up mummified in a mausoleum, along with great brains responsible for them in the first place, that are now thoroughly soaked in formaldehyde for a visiting young pioneer to salute and yawn wide with boredom. In fact, no revolutionary should be given the power, because he knows how to sabotage, but he does not know how to create. He only knows how to destroy. Give him medals and ribbons, but not the responsibility that comes with a position of power. You will have to find people who can be creative, but these will be the people who have not participated in the revolution, because the creative people were concerned with the creativity. They were not interested in who rules. Osho talks on the transmission of the lamp. Indeed, all artists I know are keen to brag, stomp their feet, and roll their eyes. After getting all emotional, they lock themselves into studio and do damage on the medium of canvas, calling it abstract art, or compose another rant in C minor as a way of existential venting. They wouldn't hurt a fly, let alone participate in destruction and murder. Power goes into the hands of those who have been fighting. As a consequence, every revolution is intrinsically bound to fail. With all the accompanying violence and chaos, revolutions are a task for the crowd. Alternatively, there's the fait accompli of an individual rebellion, as illustrious ones have shown to be the way to obtain the ultimate freedom. Jesus didn't start preaching from the tender age. Neither did Buddha sit under the tree for the love of sweet figs alone. They were made of the same clay to begin with, and arrived to their flowering through an arduous transformation that cost Gautama his kingdom and Jesus' life in the end. Osho explains that the individual changes himself. He does not care about the power structure. He simply manages to change his being, gives birth to a new man in himself. Only in rebellion can revolution succeed. Otherwise, revolution has a split personality. The gist of it all: one doesn't need to feel guilty in failing to make use of Molotov cocktails to set ablaze the oppressive structure of control for the sake of repeating the same story all over again. All one needs to do is come to peace internally. In the bigger picture, peace, as Nikola Tesla noted, is a result of universal enlightenment. And only then solutions present themselves naturally, that are enduring because the root problems have been addressed, not just their symptoms. Henry Miller once again got a handle on problem-solving psychology. This following quote is fished out from one of his opulent memoirs. "When you surrender, the problem ceases to exist. Try to solve it or conquer it, and you only set up more resistance. I'm very certain now, if I truly become what I wish to be, the burden will fall away. The most difficult thing to admit, and to realize with one's whole being, is that you alone control nothing. When one reflects on it, what is that one truly wishes to be? Can one be anything else for what one is, by divine design? Know thyself as a regular stopover on this merry-go-round called life. No matter which way you spin it, circles are getting tighter, and it's fairly unavoidable to arrive at a full stop eventually, after running back and forth between prophet's kitchen, smelling of baked cookies, and the architect's sterile office filled with past reflections. The anomaly shall be revealed. Knowing oneself is liberating for the very reason that the self part becomes unhinged and dissolved, much as a drop is dissolved into the ocean. In spite of our beliefs and the apparent boundaries, we are not separate, even for a single moment. Our atomic-size identity in this vast, constantly encroaching upon us universe is always threatened by the possibility of being swallowed up and absorbed into a greater whole. Hence, the fear, the walls of protection mounted on all sides. Wash your hands, wear your mask, sterilize your utensils and your grey matter while you're at it, in order to have that sought-after peace of mind. Doubts, like bacteria, multiply on the crumbs of information that don't fit into the prescribed narrative, till one is either forced to put his thinking into a straitjacket maintained by a regular brainwashing, or the whole terrain goes wild and explodes into inquiry. First and foremost question being how to attain deathlessness. One way is to have children, which is why we're so fond of procreation. It has nothing to do with having children at all, it has something to do with death. An artist goes further, contributing not just genetics, but injecting his very genius into the field of human intelligence and seeding appreciation of beauty in subtle forms. Yet death, the burden insidiously avoided, remains there as long as separation remains. Here's Osho on the illusion of separateness. Death disappears automatically. Fear is found no more, and your whole flavor of life changes. Then each moment is such crystal purity, a purity of delight, joy, bliss. Then each moment is eternity, and to live that way is poetry. To live moment to moment without the ego is poetry. To live without the ego is grace, is music. To live without the ego is to live and really live. That life I call poetry. The life of one who is surrendered to existence. When you surrender to existence, you are not surrendering anything real. You are simply surrendering a false notion. You're simply surrendering an illusion. You are surrendering Maya. You are surrendering something that you have never had with you in the first place. And by surrendering that which you don't have, you attain that which you have. To know that I am at home I have been and I always will be, is a great moment of relaxation, knowing that I am not an outsider, I am not alienated, I am not uprooted, that I belong to existence, and that existence belongs to me. All becomes calm and quiet and still. This stillness is surrender. The word surrender gives you a very wrong idea, as if you are surrendering something. You're not surrendering anything. You are simply dropping a dream. You are simply dropping something arbitrary that society has created.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
There you go. See if there's a dewdrop forming in the corner of your eye called a tear. I sure had torrential downpours made of these running down my cheeks on numerous occasions, mostly precipitated by getting thoroughly lost in high mountains and by the ego-stripping cleansing rituals performed in the jungle that lift up the perpetual fog of thought and allow access and letting go of hard feelings that render one insensitive to the painful memories from various trauma residing on deeper levels. Tears of regret for the lost opportunities and pain inflicted on others, for choosing manufactured illusion over life itself. This ignorance is truly the evil culprit and primary cause of all suffering, to be removed from one's own nature. One should pity the likes of Dr. Gates, Trump, Hitler, all the other famed figures who have no time to direct their energy inwards, being constantly brought to the surface by responsibilities to maintain their public presence and image, knowing thyself is not on their priority list. Graham Hancock advises that all politicians should be required to drink ayahuasca at least a dozen times before taking office, which brings us back to Peru, where this particular brew originates. Ayahuasca, known as the vine of the dead, or Kamarampi, to die, to be reborn, among the Ashaninka people, opens doors of perception like no other plant medicine and allows a glimpse to the other side. After all, what we call life is just an identification with a certain body, with a certain mind, with a certain attitude, and death is nothing but getting out of that form, out of that body, and out of that concept. One changes houses. I have to make a cut here, speaking of changing houses, but I sure hope to see you in part 3 of the DIY Guide to Evolutionary Bottlenecks, Composting of Brains, and Self-Exploding Cosmic Jokes.